So I'd like to introduce Bruce Clarkson, who's in Hamilton, New Zealand. He couldn't make it because of obvious COVID restrictions. He is the president of SERA, and please, Bruce, go ahead and open the conference.
Me and tēnā tātou katoa, welcome to you all. This is an auspicious occasion to be able to hold the conference under the current circumstances globally. I think it's a remarkable opportunity for us to reconnect that many people around the world can't do at the moment. I just wanted to repeat my acknowledgement of the Larrakia people. They are what we call mana whenua in New Zealand, traditional owners of the Darwin region, and I want to pay my personal respects as well, and particularly to acknowledge the presence of Auntie Bellawara Lee. Tēnā koe, Auntie. So most importantly, I also want to thank all of our sponsors. Now, on my initial slide there, you can see all of their logos, I'm hoping quite clearly. And the Northern Territory support in particular, I wanted to specifically mention. So because of the current circumstances that we're in, I couldn't help myself. Being an urban ecologist, I wanted to say something about what's going on at the moment globally in relation to people and nature, really. And of course, recognizing that the circumstances that we find ourselves are inexorably connected to some of the ways that we've been treating our environment and the globe. So we are in a position of what some people coined an anthropause, a situation where things are on hold. Human activity has been reduced because of COVID-19, and this has an amazing impact, particularly in our urban centres, on wildlife. And here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, we've been observing it just like everybody else. So my first image there, if you can just see on the top of the roof there, perched on the top of the roof, our kararia, our native falcon, sitting in the centre of our capital city, Wellington, starting his hunt. And of course, this is a very unique scenario. We don't normally see this sort of thing. So this is, of course, reflected in many of our bird fauna, our avifauna in New Zealand. We're finding that rarer birds have been able to come into the city, like our koremako, the bellbird here. And the headline from Radio New Zealand talking about New Zealand's native birds thriving under COVID-19 lockdown. But very professionally, I think, predicting extremely early that this would be a short-lived phenomenon. So our common birds like the piwakawaka or fantail, which you in Australia will recognise, of course, and noting very early on in the process that while the increase in bird life was remarkable, that it was a temporary feature. And of course, that proved to be absolutely correct. And around the world, we were seeing similar reports. Again, most of the reports that I saw focused on wildlife. And being a botanist, I can't help but now turn my attention to thinking about what was going on in the plant world. Of course, plants are not mobile like animals and can't recolonize quickly, and they would need a very extended period of lockdown to really make their mark, as it were. But actually, the importance of plants in the environment, the importance of plants in our green space provoked me into action, both during lockdown and post-lockdown. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about what I've been up to over this exciting period. So just a reminder of where I'm sitting right now. I'm in Hamilton City, or Kirikiriroa is the appropriate Indigenous name for our city. It's a central inland city in the North Island of New Zealand, a very small city by international standards. And I've made it my career to try and understand the ecology of the habitats within the city and try to do something about how to restore them. So the place where I've largely focused my attention has been on the Hamilton Gullies, which are the tributaries of our largest New Zealand, or longest New Zealand river, the Waikato River, which neatly bisects our city in half. And you can see in yellow there on the slide, the tributaries of that major river, the Hamilton Gullies, where we've been presented with a unique opportunity to focus our restoration efforts. And mostly we have to remove what we call novel ecosystems, and a term used internationally, obviously. We don't really want the novel ecosystems. We want to replace them with our indigenous plants because they provide the services for our wildlife. But during lockdown, spending a lot more time in my own backyard, and I'm going to show you an image of that shortly, provoked me into thinking a little bit more about some of the specific roles of some of the natives that do persist within a system dominated by exotics like grey willow. So here is my backyard. My wife Bev and I, also a member of SERA, we've been working on restoring this backyard for more than 25 years. I think actually it's getting closer to 30 years now, and we've essentially replaced the exotic grey willow system with indigenous trees to form an indigenous semi-swamp forest, which is moving along quite nicely and is starting to take on the attributes, the early stage attributes of an old growth indigenous forest. One of the things that provoked me into action during both lockdown and immediately after it, of course, was, well, what was the state of the database in the urban centre? And of course, the answer is not great. And here was this amazing opportunity presented by not having to travel into work, being able to design a day around doing some nature rambling. And this is exactly what I was doing over most of this period. Now, of course, iNaturalist, which is a worldwide platform used internationally, is also used here in New Zealand. And the data there, I just wanted to share with you, which shows some of the statistics of, this is the current number of observations, 5,188, 1,022 species, 590 people out there identifying things, and 413 observers, and one anonymous observer who over the lockdown and immediate post-lockdown period added 1,404 observations. And I'll not give a prize to anybody to guess who that actually was. I think the important thing here, though, is that it was this upswell of interest in green space in people's backyards. And when lockdown ended, with the traveling restrictions in place, the importance of people reconnecting with nature in their own local district. And this was a phenomenon that we really observed strongly in Hamilton, and is reflected strongly in the iNaturalist data, where almost 2/3 of the new records to take us to this total of just over 5,000 observations appeared during lockdown and immediately post-lockdown. And one of the things, as I said, I wanted to focus in on was to gain some better understanding and appreciation of some of those native species that persist in the so-called novel ecosystem. And I guess I was doing this because I was trying to understand how much of the indigenous system is retained in the exotic system, and what are the management implications for how one might proceed in trying to protect some of the ingredients that are there without taking the full-blown blitzkrieg approach to clearing everything. Thinking about a sympathetic way of transitioning or manipulating an ecosystem to achieve native dominance and species occupancy. And this is the early results of some of my early ramblings. So Wheki is the native tree fern, which remains within the willow forest. And my little diagram there is showing the epiphytes, which are hosted by Wheki and which are entirely linked in to high humidity in our gully system. And I've been able to, because of the large number of observations I've now made, come up with some ideas, some hypotheses about the trends in relation to humidity. And that's what my little diagram is trying to show you there, starting on the left with Pyrosia, the leather leaf fern, which you also have in Australia, and progressing all the way up to the really specialist tropical club moss is one of the common names, Phlegmariurus, up in the top right there. And that is a sequence of humidity, controlling for the age of the Feki tree fern, a sequence of humidity. But what it does show is that in order to get the full assemblage on the tree fern needs to be something of the order of 25 to 35 years old. And so if one proceeds with the restoration project without paying consideration to how one might retain some of these elements, you can actually put yourself in a position where you have to wait a further 30 years to get these ingredients back into the system. And I've also been, I guess, focusing in on indicators for how you might predict the very best habitat within a city environment. And these are just a couple of maps extracted again from iNaturalist, showing two of our very rare members of the plant community. The one on the left, Leptopterus, and the one on the right, our only native orchid in the city environment within Kirikiriroa, Hamilton. So that's enough about what I've been up to. I'll move on next to talk about more important matters. And of course, the most important matter is the conference at hand. And it is my privilege, again, to welcome you to the conference, to I guess, ask you to make the absolute most of this remarkable opportunity, and also to point out the remarkable irony or coincidence that as we emerge in Australia and in New Zealand, at least, from the COVID-19 situation, that at the same time the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration was announced. Some of us, of course, have been waiting for this opportunity all of our lives. Here is our chance to really do something about improving the globe, reversing biodiversity decline, assisting in mitigating climate change, and generally doing good work. And so I'm proud that SERA has persisted to deliver this conference, and I'm particularly proud that SERA, Society Ecological Restoration, is a global partner for the UN Decade of Ecosystem Restoration. I want you to watch out for the symposium on Thursday, focused around the Ecosystem Restoration Decade. But apart from that, again, best wishes for the conference. I'll be dipping in from time to time. Make the most of this wonderful opportunity. Thank you very much.